In Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried, he wrote, "Sometimes remembering will lead to a story, which makes it forever. That's what stories are for. Stories are for joining the past to the future." Hi, I'm Nick Tayer. I teach social studies and applied mathematics for grades 7 through 12 at Pine Eagle High School in Oregon's gateway to Hell's Canyon, the town of Halfway. And I'm here to help you have engaging conversations through collaborative storytelling in the Harvard Business School's case study method. Collaborative storytelling, like many forms of stories, consists of 6 parts. Each part builds on its predecessor to create a cohesive whole that joins past to present. It includes an inciting incident, a steady state world, a call to action, a journey into the wilderness, a point of no return, and a moment of confrontation. The first part of our story is its inciting incident. This isn't the traditional approach to building a narrative. Traditionally, we focus on background building in a chronological order towards a conclusion. This is how we teach most of our history. We start somewhere in the beginning and end somewhere near the present, and thus it has been, and thus it always shall be. Instead, I start with the inciting incident because it provides a compelling hook that causes students to ask, how did we get here? My inciting incident came on my 35th birthday when our administration informed us that we would not have classes again until at least April due to COVID 19, and predicted, correctly, that we wouldn't have in person classes for the remainder of the year. We were instructed to spend the following week planning for how we would deliver instruction online for the remaining 8 weeks of school. Now, if I've done my job right, you're wondering what that means for me. Some of you can guess. You went through this yourself. Which leads us to the second part of the story, the steady state world. This is the time, place, and things that were happening and would have continued to happen had a crisis not occurred. My steady state world was much like anyone else's, presenting lessons to my students, discussing them, assessing them. Within my economics and civics course, this was built around breaking down stories from today and asking questions that would often connect us to the past. I did my best to take things students were exposed to in the classroom and adapt them to online. Now, you might think I would go on Zoom, Skype, Meet, but I avoided that. Folks around here were busy with vaccinating, branding, and turning out their cattle. I wanted to give my students the flexibility to do their part on the ranch. I also wanted students who weren't ranchers to have the flexibility to assist their parents in taking care of their younger siblings. As a result, I focused on projects and discussion boards. The things I'd done throughout my college career when taking online courses, and the things we'd done in class. After a couple of weeks of this, I sent out a feedback form, and let me tell you, the results weren't great. They gave me a clear call to action. A call to action in collaborative storytelling is what lights a fire under the group to do something. People, by nature, and I'm no different, are reactive. Had I not regularly collaborated with students about what was and wasn't working, I would have had nothing to react to. Students would have slowly checked out as home life and summer weather came upon us, while I complacently went about my life. One of the key things about collaborative storytelling is that a call to action won't always come to you like it does in the movies. Sometimes you have to go find R2 and 3PO rather than have them come to you. The reason why we're reactive by nature and tend not to seek out a call to action is that it inevitably leads us on a journey into the wilderness. This is a journey that presents a world that is opposite of the steady state world. Finding something that would allow me to answer my students' call to action was critical. It was my journey into the wilderness. I had to go find new ways of connecting with my students because the ways that I had attempted weren't working in an online environment. What I found was the Harvard Case Method Project. The Case Method Project works by presenting students with case studies of historical events that are structured along these same 6 parts of collaborative storytelling. The thing about case studies is that they take 2 or sometimes 3 weeks to complete, and by the time I'd gone through the training, I only had 2 weeks remaining in my economics and civics class. This was a point of no return. It was a trapdoor that prevented me from going backwards. There are points in both stories and our lives where we're faced with a moment where if we choose to go forward, then there will be no going back. If I chose to run a case study, then it would be it for the year. Good or bad, it would be what I left students with, and if bad, there would be no opportunity for salvaging it. I'd made my decision though. I was here to teach. What I was doing wasn't working the way I'd hoped, and so I pressed towards the moment of confrontation. I was Luke screaming down the trench of the Death Star with one shot, and make or miss, either I was going to change the world or the world was going to change me. Despite having not done much face to face time with my economics and civics class, I let them know that we were going to have some now. And that was something they had asked for. One of the biggest complaints students had was the lack of face to face time. We had all, as high school teachers, thought, well, if I was a teenager, I'd want the maximum amount of flexibility to do it on my schedule, not yours. But they missed the social interaction that comes with school, and they wanted to have it back. And so I gave them three options. First, they could attend the Google Meet session during our regular class time and have a discussion of the case study with their classmates. Second, if that didn't work, but they still would prefer to do it as a discussion instead of in writing, they could do it one on one or with a partner, arrange a Google Meet with me during my prep time to discuss the case study. Third and finally, they could write a 100 word response to each question we were going to cover in the case study discussions. I felt that I needed to still provide flexibility because though the cattle was turned out in the forest, and although with sunnier skies and complacency regarding COVID as it had yet to hit our community, there was less demand for babysitting. I had seen throughout the prior 6 weeks that students were completing work at various times and wanted to give them the freedom to continue doing that. For the Google Meet sessions, I posted the questions on Google Classroom. I swear I'm not a Google rep, so that they could know what we were covering. When the students were on Google Meet, I used the mute unmute function as a way for them to raise their hands. This worked okay, but I later had our IT department allow the students to add a Chrome extension that had them use a raised hand emoji like there is on Zoom, and that worked quite a bit better. I spread the discussion out across 4 class periods, with each discussion lasting between 40 and 55 minutes. Sorry to my students who I went a few minutes long on that one day. Now, for teaching, there's a seventh part that comes with this. And for me, this is perhaps the true point of confrontation. This is my after action review. The last thing I had students do was complete a feedback form because although I felt like it was more engaging than what we had done the previous 6 weeks, I needed to hear it from them just to be sure. I went through each line. Students felt the readings were informative and challenging, but that the discussions did a great job of clearing up in conclusion. Most satisfying for me was that 80% of students said that if they had the opportunity to take a case study based civics and econ class, they would do it regardless of whether or not it was an elective or a requirement. This was ecstatic. This was everything I had hoped for when I adopted the case method project. Now, case studies, like collaborative storytelling, consist of 6 parts. Each part builds on its predecessor to create a cohesive whole that joins past to present. I want to briefly talk you through the case study my class discussed, Martin Luther King Jr. and the struggle for Black voting rights. First was the inciting incident. The case puts you immediately in the thick of the action. You're marching towards the Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, side by side with Dr. King. He tells you that an agreement has been reached where if you turn the thousands of protesters around at the bridge, nobody will be arrested. To quote the case, the troopers and lawmen waited. According to at least one report, marchers began singing a freedom song, "Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around." The TV cameras were again rolling. King now had to decide whether to turn the march around at the bridge or to push forward as his fellow marchers were expecting. Second, rather than resolving what happens at the Pettus Bridge, we then go back and explore the steady state world of segregation from Reconstruction through to Brown versus Board of Education. These 2 parts, the inciting incident and the steady state world, are the first day's discussion. The discussion is built on me establishing myself not as Mr. Answers, but as Mr. Questions. The key to this is asking open questions, even the dreaded counterfactual or hypothetical, because it is through questions that start with what if or why didn't that you expose the underlying constraints that caused circumstances to unfold as they did. Examples from day one included, given the 14th and 15th Amendments, which guaranteed equal protection of the laws and voting rights irrespective of race, color, or previous condition of servitude, and which were ratified in 1868 and 1870 respectively, how did racial segregation and large-scale disenfranchisement of Black citizens become entrenched in the South over such a long period of time? Right, this is a broad question that really struggles against having simple answers and starts to expose things about our democracy that perhaps students weren't prepared to confront. Third comes the call to action. specifically Dr. King's call to action and the Montgomery bus boycotts. How he came to be the one who was called upon to lead that moment, despite or perhaps because he wasn't a native of Montgomery. Next, we have to go explore Dr. King's journey into the wilderness in the early 1960s when the sit ins, freedom rides, and the failure of the Albany protests threatened to leave Dr. King behind. The call to action and the journey into the wilderness were day 2 of our class. Some questions were: why did the NAACP, founded in 1909, adopt a legal strategy to fight segregation and disenfranchisement in the early decades of the 20th century? And more importantly, if you had been around at that time, would you have been optimistic or pessimistic about this strategy? This is where we get into the potential for counterfactuals, right? What happens if those cases don't win? Many of the early cases, Plessy, for example, don't. How does that impact how you feel about that strategy? How do you explain the timing of the U.S. Supreme Court's 1954 Brown decision, which declared that separate educational facilities are inherently unequal? Could this decision have come 20 years earlier? 50? Why or why not? We start going into these different alternate paths that things could have happened, so that way we can see why what happened did happen. Fifth is the point of no return. This is the Birmingham protests and the March on Washington. These are the moments that cement Dr. King's legacy and lead to the 1964 Civil Rights Act and King himself being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. But for King, there's still work to be done, which covers day 3 of our class. By early 1965, what was the SCLC strategy for securing comprehensive voting rights legislation? How had King and other leaders come to this strategy? If you had been advising civil rights leaders at the time, would you have endorsed this strategy or recommended a different one? The case itself doesn't actually explore what those different strategies are, but students will intuitively understand often that there are other options. In fact, the most favorite option of any student is, why go through all this nonviolent stuff when you can just rise up and revolt? And then we can explore why, one, that is a path that is somewhat explored by later parts of the movement and earlier parts of the movement, and 2, why it won't work. Finally, the moment of confrontation. We return to where we start. We ask one question for the final day. Imagine you have been marching beside King on March 9th, and that he privately told you about the turnaround option, and then asked you for your advice about what to do. What would you recommend and why? This is really the assessment part of what we're doing here. This is the part where we're trying to get them to get students to support and defend conclusions, right? To come up with their own answer. Now, the thing about this is that the students still don't know how this resolves. They don't know what happens after. They don't know what King does. That's not a part of the case. That's the part that I, as the teacher, when we get into that after action review, goes through and discusses with them. So we spend about half the day just discussing this one question. And we go through it. And you're going to find that many students will do something different than what actually happened. They will take the counterfactual and not just take it, but assume it's right. And then you get to blow their mind by showing how things actually unfolded. Collaborative storytelling, like many forms of stories, consists of 6 parts: an inciting incident, a steady state world, a call to action, a journey into the wilderness, a point of no return, and a moment of confrontation. Each part builds on its predecessor to create a cohesive whole that joins past to present. By building case studies structured to these 6 beats of a story, you can collaborate with your students and develop engaging conversations. Thank you.